We are ready.
All right. Welcome to the May 19th, 2022 meeting of the CB6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, the chair of CB6 Public Safety Committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:32 p.m. And tonight we're joined by CB6 Assistant District Manager, Brendan Wirth. Members of the public, you can raise questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. And if there's time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take minutes for tonight's meeting. So if you're able to take minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Are there any volunteers to take minutes tonight?
Hey, Matt, I could do it.
Who is that?
It's Eric.
Oh, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. All right. So thanks to Eric. And of course, we still have the Doodle sign-up sheet. So if you get a chance, please fill that out for the future months. And now we'll take attendance, and Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser.
Present.
Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
Seema is not with us tonight. And Lou Sapersky.
Yo.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you, Brendan. So the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. Committee members, if there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So members of the committee, if you do object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. And I will note that that we had been going back and forth on the agenda here and switched around a couple of things. So it may look a little different than it did a week ago. All right, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. I think everyone's familiar with the ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. As a reminder, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having, or to state in writing information such as email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you. You can unmute yourself so you can speak. And we're required by New York State law to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting. So please keep your comments, your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Brings us to committee business here, agenda item number 1. And we will be hearing from the New York City Commission on Human Rights. This was been in the works for quite some time here. And I want to thank Jonah for stepping in. I know we were having some difficulties finding a speaker tonight, but Jonah, thanks for stepping up, and the floor is yours. We're just going to give us an overview of what the mission does, and then this will be the first of an ongoing series, which will cover throughout the years. Jonah, take it away. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone, for having me. Again, my name is Jonah Boyarin. I'm an associate human rights specialist at the Commission on Human Rights. I work out of our Manhattan Community Service Center, which is based downtown Manhattan near City Hall. I'm also the Jewish Communities Liaison for the Commission. So I'm here with the Public Safety Committee, correct? Okay, so before I jump into an overview of the commission and our different offerings. I just want to, work the room a little bit, get a sense of what you guys are thinking about with public safety stuff. So I want to start by asking, what does safety look like to you? What does safety look like to you? So you can, I don't know how you usually facilitate this, but for me, you can unmute it or put it in the chat, whatever.
Yeah, committee members, if you want to raise your hand to chime in on that.
Yeah, Brandon.
Brendan.
I just want to make a quick note that, just for the record, that human rights issues are also within the purview of the Public Safety Committee. So I just wanted to make that quick note.
Thank you, Brandon. Yes, thank you for that reminder. You made that clear in our pre-meeting, but I appreciate the reminder as well. So what does safety look like to you?
Do we have any committee members that want to chime in?
In the absence of anybody else offering a thought, safety would be the absence of a threat of harm or negative conduct.
Thank you, Lou. Anyone else?
Steve, did you have your hand up before?
I'll use a practical example. Safety to me would be able to walk at night where the street lamps are lit and without any fear of anyone attacking or any fear. Being able to walk around at night is a good gauge of safety, regardless of me being a man or my wife was a woman of color walking around. Just think that's a good indicator of safety.
Mm-hmm. So Lou said of the absence of an immediate threat and how you illustrated, Stephen, just what could it be like just to walk around at night and feel safe, no matter who you are. And you said in particular for all of us, but also some people are more vulnerable to threat and harassment than others right now, including women of color. Great. And next question, just where to you does safety come from? There's not one right or wrong answer to any of these. It's just to get a sense of where we're at. Where does safety come from?
Any committee members have any thoughts?
Sure, I guess it's just a combination of public institutions, private institutions, individuals. I guess the whole set of stakeholders in the community are working together to provide it.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Steve.
Trust, kind of a little tangential to what Eric has mentioned, and that's including anyone else that's not members of an agency, elected official, but our neighbors, visitors, being able to trust and be able to agree on the basic social contract of how we agree to live.
Mm-hmm. So down to that kind of stranger on the street.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anything else or anyone else that hasn't spoken yet that wants to answer either question before we move on? Okay. Matt, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say it's a small committee, so we only have like 4 members, so 5 members tonight. So.
It's good. This very good participation rate. I feel very comfortable with this. Yeah. Before I did this job, I taught high school for 7 years, so it takes a lot to phase me as a facilitator at this point. This is great. So our agency, the Commission on Human Rights, exists for 2 reasons. We were founded by Mayor Pharaoh LaGuardia about 80 years ago now. And our mandate is twofold. The first is to enforce the human rights law in the city. Oh, sorry, let me turn that timer off. To enforce the human rights law in the city. It's one of the oldest and most comprehensive in New York City, in the country rather. And the second part is to foster positive intergroup relations. And that's can be interpreted pretty broadly. But both of those parts are trying to make this whole sort of social contract, this whole great experiment that is New York City. I think it's like one of the greatest experiments in human history is putting people from 100 different places and backgrounds and squeezing us all together in this, mosaic or melting pot or whatever you want to call it. So our agency exists to make it be the best version of itself. So on the law enforcement side, that means there's a really broad set of protections for your race, gender, nationality, language, and many other categories that you have the civil protections under the law to be treated equally in employment and when going shopping, getting a taxi, as a tenant, and in other domains as well. And then again, this kind of broadly interpreted mandate of fostering positive intergroup relations. So I'm in the Community Relations Bureau. So I'm falling a little bit more in that second part, which means I educate about the human rights law, and I also work with communities to try to get us all to be the best version of ourselves. We're an agency of, 150 people in a city of millions. So, we're one small force, along with you all and many others. And as our strength lies in working with community groups like your own, local groups that have, whether it's houses of worship or community boards or CBOs, that have a presence in neighborhoods and are leading and working with neighbors to make good, safe neighborhoods where everyone's treated equally. So in terms of our offerings, we do a human rights law 101 training. I'm going to give you just a few slides of what that looks like so that you can get a little bit of a taste of it. Hopefully it'll be informational for you, but also so you know what it looks like in case you want to bring it in a fuller version to any of your settings. Give me a moment here. Can you all see this okay? So the human rights law applies in all 5 of these areas. Employment and housing, I would say, are our 2 most common areas where cases get brought to us. Also public accommodations, which is this kind of grab bag, anything the public uses, buses, hotels, taxis, bodegas. Discriminatory harassment means when someone is has their civil rights violated, being threatened or physically harmed, along with an explicit targeting of their protected identity. Right. So, we have the First Amendment in this country, which is a beautiful thing. And one of the hard parts is it is legally protected to say something hateful to a stranger or to anyone else, as long as you don't pair that with intimidation, threat, or physical harm. But if you do, then in addition to possible criminal liability, there's also civil liability that we enforce. And the last category is bias-based profiling by law enforcement. Generally, there's a 1-year window with one exception for gender-based harassment, which is 3 years from the time of the incident to filing a complaint. And we have this really broad set of protections, these categories. So just to name some that, for a sense of the variety here: age, creed, which means religion, disability, gender, immigration status, race, sexual orientation, unemployment status, etc. And this is specifically in the context of seeking employment. So you also have like credit history on here, et cetera, which won't necessarily apply or wouldn't apply in a public accommodation case where someone's, trying to get a taxi or something. Credit history is not a protected category. Similarly, there's in the context of housing, there's a lot of overlap in the protected identities, some differences. One of the most common forms of discrimination we see in housing is Section 8 violations. Section 8 is basically any lawful source of income, including Section 8, cannot be discriminated against. It's the same, should be the same money to a landlord as income from a job or anything else. So that's one of the most common source of income cases, or some of the most common cases that our agency sees. So we go into depth in about all of these different protected classes and how they apply. I'll also highlight let me see if I can just jump to this. The reasonable, actually, I'll just stop the share. We also highlight the reasonable accommodations process. This is another common form of case we see, is that, say, someone is in a wheelchair or someone who is able to walk and lives in a walk-up building or a building with 2 steps coming into the lobby and no ramp, loses the ability to walk. That happens all the time for a million different reasons. Could be course of illness or infirmity with age or other reasons. If that's the case, they have the legal right to a reasonable accommodation. So that means an accommodation that meets their needs. In this case, we've had people, New Yorkers, file complaints with us who have been homebound for over a year or 2 when that situation has happened. So those people are due an accommodation where they can get in and out of the building, right? That's something most of us take for granted, but it's a huge quality of life issue. And it's got to be a reasonable accommodation, meaning it doesn't cause undue hardship to the landlord, or if it were in the case of an employer, the employer, and so forth. And what we look for is a good faith effort between both parties. That's ultimately what we're trying to arbit, and in the context of what's the landlord's overall income and expenses look like, how expensive the particular accommodation is, if there's a cheaper one that meets the same need, and so forth. So that's our human rights law. We do this a lot with businesses, business improvement districts. This was the Know Your Obligations version. There's also a Know Your Rights version that we do with workers and tenants and others. One last point about this is that if you or anyone imagine in your position at community board, people come to you when this kind of thing might happen. They say, you might be one of the people that come to and say, what do I do? They can call 311 and ask for the Commission on Human Rights, and they can do an intake that way. And that intake process will determine whether there's sufficient grounds for a complaint or not. So that's our Human Rights Law 101. Before I talk about any other offerings, let me pause and just ask any questions, any thoughts about where this could be useful to you, questions about the content or the law itself.
Questions from anybody so far? Yeah, I would say I would say accessibility issues are definitely an ongoing problem throughout the city. So that's definitely something that we should be focused on.
Yeah, I would say that I've seen that a lot of tenants with disabilities or accommodation needs don't know that they are legally owed a reasonable accommodations process. And just to give you, again, a sense of some of the variety of what that could look like, it could be that someone is in a wheelchair and is not able to, if they have, as is common in New York, one of these bathtub showers, you can't will yourself into a bathtub shower. So a reasonable accommodation might be installing a panel that fully opens from the floor and then closes to be, watertight sealed. Or it could be changing the height of a chopping island, in the kitchen so that's at an appropriate height for someone.
Stu, you have a question?
So a person has an option of either litigating in court or coming before the commission. Court can obviously issue an order. The commission is essentially a mediator. Is that right?
The commission is the enforcer of the human rights law. So the commission can make a legally binding ruling. In terms of what our process looks like, there would be an intake. If we thought there was standing and cause, then we would recommend to the person, or at least suggest to the person, that if they want to, they could file an official complaint. It would then either go into mediation through us, it could go into some kind of settlement, or it could proceed through the city as administrative court system. And then ultimately that court system makes a recommendation, which our commission is the one who makes the final call on. Specifically, our commissioner makes the final call on it. So, people can pursue their own civil lawsuits, or, in the case of, say, discriminatory harassment on the street, where someone gets shoved and called a slur under protected class, they could pursue criminal charges. They're not mutually exclusive from what we do, but that is what we do, is we enforce a civil law in this case. I say that, and with the proviso that I'm not an attorney. I'm with our Community Relations Bureau. So, I've studied under our attorneys how to communicate to the public about it, but I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not an attorney. And I'm always happy to look something up and ask one of our attorneys if I'm unclear about something, or, if you just need a level of depth that I haven't provided.
So as a complainant, why would somebody go to you as opposed to directly to a court?
Well, again, I'm going to say this. This is not legal advice, and I'm not an attorney, but the law that has been violated, let me put it differently. If someone's landlord says, I don't care that you're in a wheelchair now, and I don't care that you can't get in and out of your building, I don't want to talk to you, you don't pay enough rent, or something like that for me to worry about that. In that case, that hypothetical case, they have violated the human rights law, and we are the enforcers of that law. So we are the ones that you come to in that case. Now, there could be other kinds of liability involved that might be pursued through the civil courts and stuff, depending on what the case is. But they have violated the human rights law in that case, and we are the enforcers that they come to. If you want to pursue that. In terms of what the outcomes could be, there's up to $125,000 in penalties. We have the ability to, give an order basically to say you need to make the following changes to your employment patterns, to train your employees in something you haven't trained before, to hire employees who have a competency that you haven't had before, or to provide this accommodation to this tenant so they can get in and out of the building, and so forth.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, it's basically a city agency versus a lawsuit. It's usually much more difficult to go to the courts to get a judgment. Legal fees, attorneys, and whatnot.
Good. I think Stuart might have his hand up again.
That's good. So did you have a question? Your hand's up.
Sorry, can you talk about restorative justice, which is also on your website?
Sure. So we have a few different tools that we use in this arena. Just, since I'm new to meeting you, I just want to give a brief summary of what I mean when I'm talking about restorative justice. So restorative justice is a means of saying what, by a particular harmful act, what was harmed and how can it be restored? And it tries to find alternatives to punitive measures, to ones that are hopefully more cooperative and healing. So we have a few tools that we use in this arena. One is we do healing circles with affected communities. So an example of that was there was a noose found in Marcus Garvey Park in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So that's very threatening symbol. And it's not clear in that case, the noose is found in the park. Never found out, as far as I know, who had done it. And it wasn't targeting just one individual, it was targeting a community, or at the very least affecting a whole community. So in that kind of case, healing circle, where people just have a chance to process what's happened to them and then what they want to do as a community going forward. If there's a project or something they want to do to take care of it themselves, to build bonds with their neighbors, of solidarity and allyship. Another example that I'll give is, because I'm the Jewish Communities Liaison, I ran this effort. There was when there was a string of really bad anti-Semitic assaults 2.5 years ago, there was a relatively more minor egging incident in Borough Park, where groups of Hasidic Jews at a Hasidic Jewish synagogue had eggs thrown at them and into them. And so they did find the perpetrator was youths from Kensington. So we went and they happened to be Bangladeshi Muslim youths. So we put together community groups. I'm just going to turn my video off for a minute while I'm talking, just to get, because of technical issues, but I'm still with you. So we worked with community groups who are Muslim Bangladeshi based out of Kensington, and we worked with Jewish Brooklyn groups, and we went in mixed groups of city agency workers and Muslim Bangladeshi residents and Brooklyn Jewish residents, and canvassed both neighborhoods with bystander intervention tips saying, we heard what happened, we're really sorry, what do you need? What can we do to work together? And we were very well received in both neighborhoods. And we followed that up with a bystander intervention training, where we had mixed groups of Hasidic Jews and Bangladeshi Muslims getting trained in skills to look out for each other. So that's another example of restorative justice work that we've done. And a third that I'll offer is, and there are incidents at schools sometimes. So there was a homophobic incident in a school, middle school. And so we worked with the school leaders, principals, and parents and others. And we ended up, as part of the group, we gave our LGBT youth training to every single middle schooler over the course of a year. We went into every single middle school classroom in the middle school, and did 3 sessions with the youths there. So that's
how did these cases get to you? Were they referred by the school, Department of Education, district attorney's office?
It really, really varies. It really varies. It can be any of the above. And I'll add to it that, one of my jobs is having the ear to the ground, in Manhattan, but also specifically for me with Jewish communities. And I have counterparts working in Muslim communities and LGBT communities and Black communities and so forth. And when we hear about this, we don't have the staffing to do it every time, but try to reach out proactively when we can and offer people options.
Well, I'm asking you because, the district attorney has made restorative justice or diversion a big part of his agenda. So I'm wondering how much what role you play in that as opposed to other agencies and partners.
Yeah, I think that's still taking shape. He's still relatively new in his tenure, but I can say that we've had meetings that I've participated in within the Manhattan DA's office, figuring out what we can do in that area. And my personal sense is, I'm not speaking for the DA, certainly. I'm not even speaking for an agency. My personal sense is just, our strength is in having a little bit more of a grassroots community approach within the realm of government. That's the particular, emphasis that we have. And so, we're able to do sometimes direct work with communities, or we have relationships on the ground that we can bring in. I can say with other DAs in previous tenures, I'm talking citywide here, sometimes something's happened in a neighborhood and the DA wants to take a restorative approach and just isn't sure, okay, where is the youth who did this? Where are they going to volunteer? Right? If part of this is volunteering in the community, who's it with? And so we've been one of those kind of playing that bridge role sometimes to say, oh, we know a few organizations who might consider this, and we can introduce you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions. Okay, let me talk a little bit about a couple of our other trainings. See if I can get this loaded up. So one of our relatively newer and one of our most popular trainings is our bystander intervention training, which we developed in partnership with the Center for Anti-Violence Education in New York. It's a great CVO based out of Brooklyn. And this is a training that emphasizes, what to do when something goes down on the street. We've all, as New Yorkers, we've all seen some pretty unexpected situations and maybe some pretty hairy situations, and we don't always know what to do. Many of these cases, there's a bystander crowd effect where everyone says, oh, someone else is going to do something or should do something, but I'm not going to, or I don't know what to do. And so this is kind of like a first aid training, but for being a neighbor on the subway or on the street. Give some very practical skills. So, we give some background in this training on some of the theory behind this. We also get to some very practical, concrete stuff. So, for instance, as bystander, one of the great things people can do is delegate. They can point to someone and say, hey, take a video of this, or hey, call 911, or, hey, get a few other people that come help. Distracting is one of the great strategies. This is one that I never thought of until I had been trained myself as a participant in these trainings. As a way of an example, I'll say, I was taking the A train down to work some, I guess, two and a half years ago. And I was sitting, and across from me, I kind of just out of the corner of my eye noticed that there was a man standing just very close over the woman sitting across from me, like a little too close. And at first I thought maybe they knew each other, but then as the stops went by, I noticed she just had really scared body language. They weren't talking easily. And he was standing too close, and he was starting to talk to her in a kind of aggressive ways. And I looked at her, just tried to assess the situation, and made eye contact, and saw she gave me a significant look like, I don't like this. And I went over to him and I said, hey. And he said, yeah. And I said, which way is it to Coney Island? And he said, what? I said, what train do you take to Coney Island? Someone told me you take the 2-3 uptown to Coney Island. He said, no. That's not how you get to Coney Island. So he gave me some instructions, and then I kept playing dumb. I said, oh, so okay, switch to the uptown. Well, and he said, no, down. I said, well, do you like Coney Island? But I don't know if I should go there. Do you recommend it? So then he started giving me his recommendations of what he didn't like at Coney Island. And that kind of just burst the bubble. It took his attention away. And after a couple stops, he got off the train. And the woman and I rode the train, for another 5 or 6 stops together until, talking until it was her time to go. And I asked her how she was. She said, "I'm okay. Thank you." And that was it, But it's a non-intuitive skill. For me, the more intuitive thing that I used to do before I had this training was I would just go up to them and be like, "Hey, knock it off," which can go in a couple of different directions. Either I might be too scared to do that because I know it's escalatory, or I've done it and then, someone takes a swing at me or something. So there's some very concrete skills that we work with in this training that I have used myself and they don't work every time, but they work pretty well in a variety of situations. So that's one that I love doing, I love sharing, and I've seen be very popular. And then just our broader set of specialized trainings. I wrote our curriculum on understanding Jewish experiences and anti-Semitism. We just launched it last month. We do it with Department of Education, other city agencies, schools, colleges, community groups. So during a time when there's a lot more anti-Semitism, that might be something that you or people might want to learn more about, understand where's it coming from, what does it look like, how to identify it, how to respond. So that's the kind of thing I do. But our agency does that with understanding Muslim experiences and young women's experiences and LGBT and race and color and so forth. So we do all these kinds of specialized things that can meet specific needs for understanding in different settings. Stephen, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I love that example. Are these trainings public, accessible, or is that something? How do anyone get to these trainings?
Yeah, I'm happy to be your contact person, and you can book them through me, or I can write connect you to the person who will book a given training. We had, unfortunately, the city procedure or bureaucracy is such that I can't email out a copy of the PowerPoint, but we're a public service, book us, we love doing this stuff. So, it could be for the community board, or it could be a community group or a house of worship that you belong to, or your, kid's school or a friend's kid's school or whatever it is.
Do you have a list of the trainings? Because it's,
Yes. Give me a moment and I'll pull this up.
Yeah, while he's pulling up that list, I will say that training is something that we are considering here at CV6. I'm just not sure if it's going to fall within the committee or if it would be a special event for the district. But I think the audience is a little bigger than our committee for that.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. Any other thoughts or questions while I'm pulling up these?
I know some of these trainings or all these trainings are not available for, freely accessible. Or are there any plans for the human rights group to start posting some samples of it, like on social media, like YouTube or that nature? Because even little tidbits of that kind of is like a bit of an appetizer to get people's interests in, because right now I'm clicking around the website and left-handed trying to find where trainings might be listed.
Yeah, our website is due for an overhaul. I will pass on what you've said to my superiors. It's good feedback. I can't promise, it's not under my control that we'll act on making this stuff more readily visible, but I'll pass on the feedback, and I know we are working on revamping the website. I put in the chat, meanwhile, a full list of our trainings offerings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I would just ask the committee members or any members of the public who might be viewing this to let us know if there's anything specific. I think the bystander training is definitely one that we'll be scheduling probably for the fall at this point, but hopefully on a broader platform than just a committee meeting.
That's great.
But my intention is to have different, either different trainings or different programs with CCHR during the course of the year, as things come up, or as we time it.
Yep, well, we're here for that, so that's great. I think, we're probably in our last couple of minutes here, so any final questions or thoughts from anyone here?
How did you guys link up with the Center of Anti-Violence Education? By the way, I can't find it on that list.
How did we link up with them?
Yeah, like did you get feedback from, like, say, a community board, or how did you link up? That's a topic that you can partner with an organization that makes sense for building a training program. I mean,
Yeah, I can tell you, the part of the story that I know, which definitely isn't the whole story, but we definitely had a relationship going back for years with CAE NY, because they, as a CBO, are trying to get communities to get along with each other better and to empower New Yorkers. They do like self-defense training for teenage girls and bystander intervention for the general public. So they're really invested in this sort of like safety from all of us. And that's aligned with what we do, which is, trying to get us all to look out for each other and get along. And, that just was an area of emphasis a few years ago. This was a previous administration. That was an area of emphasis and continues to be, is just saying there's a lot of hate violence right now. It's been on the increase for the last several years throughout the country and in the city. So how are we helping, our agency has this role of helping everyday New Yorkers and leaders look out for each other. So this was a tool that we realized would be really valuable. And I think from CAE's side, they said, well, you, the Commission on Human Rights, have an even broader platform as a city agency. So if we partner with you, the good work that we're doing is going to get to a wider variety of people.
All right. I mean, I asked because us as community board members, just looking for how we can help connect some of the dots that we may see in our communities that makes sense, and hopefully connect those dots for the next training. I stand corrected. I believe the one you showed that was connected with Center for Anti-Violence Education, that's one called Bystander Intervention Workshop.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you.
That's right. Yeah, and that's wonderfully said, Stephen. It's like, we're buying for the people. We're serving the public, and our best ideas come from working with the public. So you in your leadership position, I think, have that ear to the ground, and we want to know what the needs are, and if we need to develop something, we want to. All right, folks, I think I'm at time, and I want to be respectful of your agenda and so forth. So I'll put my email in the chat over here in case you don't have it already at hand, and just really happy to get to meet with you all and to be in touch further as we continue.
All right, thanks, Jonah. Really appreciate you giving us an overview here, and I think we've highlighted some things to follow up on in the months ahead. So
Very good.
look forward to it, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks, Matt. See you, Brendan. Thank you both. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. All right, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about something entirely different, and that is cybersecurity threats and attacks. So we're going to keep this high level. So I believe we have Ben with us from the Joint Security Operations Center of New York State. to give us an overview of what's going on here. I know cybersecurity comes up here and there, a lot of threats, a lot of concerns. So Ben, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me this evening. So my name is Ben Vos-Gardner. I'm the director of the Office of Counterterrorism for the state. And I was asked to speak to you tonight about Governor Hochul's Joint Cybersecurity Operations Center initiative, which she is doing in conjunction with Mayor Adams and the mayors of Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and Yonkers. Really proud of this initiative. It's sort of a first in the nation initiative to bring in cybersecurity telemetry from all over the state. So in other words, what that means is we're going to be collecting data from local governments all over the state, and our intent is to build out over time. We're very much in the nativity phase right now, but the intent over time is to bring in every county in the state so that we can begin to recognize if there is, say, for example, suspicious cyber activity going on in Buffalo, we'll be able to know immediately whether something similar is occurring in, Brooklyn or Lewis County or Suffolk County. This will be a big leap forward for us. Currently and sort of historically, we've been far more dependent on federal resources to be able to identify threats. And obviously there's a delay there when you have to work through layers of bureaucracy. So we believe this investment will make the state as a whole more secure, but certainly New York City more secure. And I'd like to give a lot of credit to New York City. We're modeling this in part off of the New York City Cyber Command initiative that was started a couple of years ago. We think they have an outstanding model for what we're trying to do. And we have been working lockstep with them since the beginning of this initiative a few weeks ago. We've got a physical location that is set up in Brooklyn, ideal location. We're sharing the building with NYPD. We're close to a couple technical colleges that we look forward to leveraging our relationship with over time. But all in all, I would say this is a really exciting initiative. We've got buy-in from some of our federal partners. We're already engaged with counties throughout the state who are excited to join this initiative. What I can say is that I'm confident that once this is up and fully running, not only New York City, but the state as a whole will be in a much more secure posture from a cybersecurity perspective. I think that was pretty high level, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, let's see if there's any questions from the committee here. Stu.
I hope this is in order. I want to ask you a really rudimentary question about, and probably one that's too long-winded. I don't know anything about the architecture of these systems. My even using the term architecture is pretentious. But so I'd appreciate if you'd explain to me why you can't keep the server code of a computer secured behind a physical fortress, that is, behind an air gap, while allowing end users like me to access the data over the internet. Let me try to be more specific. The ordinary end user like me needs access to data and maybe to some hosted programs, but I don't need to see the business logic, by which I mean the server code. So it should be impossible for anyone like me using my credentials to install malicious code into the computer. You could even impose an API between the server and the internet so that only circumscribed data can pass between the server and the internet.
Stuart, I can answer your question pretty quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is very sophisticated architecture. And frankly, when we start getting into some of our local government partners, their networks are not segregated at all. A lot of the security architecture you just mentioned is not there. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily have someone who is a full-time cybersecurity professional who's in a position to implement those protocols. So, I mean, what you're describing is sort of a perfect world scenario that I think is somewhere we are a long way off from. And, in a home rule state like New York State, where it's very difficult to dictate to smaller levels of government, we don't have sticks, right? We just have carrots. So this is our initiative to try to help bring their level of security up.
And so there's no way to create a universal package that can assist local governments or power companies or anything like that?
I don't want to say there's no way to do it. I would say that at this juncture, it's probably cost prohibitive, and it would also require everybody to be prepared to get on board with that. And like I said, we just don't have a way to compel everybody to get on board with that.
As long as there's a gap here, can you also talk about NYC Secure? What's the role of that?
So I'm a state representative. So unfortunately, I don't think I'm in the best position to talk about a New York City initiative.
So, Stu, did you have another question, or is that?
No, I didn't think I raised my hand again, but.
Oh, it's all right. So I guess, so what are some of the key takeaways that the community should walk away from?
I think
your initiative.
What not only community board 6 members, but also the city of New York generally, and the state of New York. When this is fully up and running, the state will be more secure, for the simple reason that we're just going to have more visibility into where our risks are. I mean, as Stuart mentioned, that there are, why can't we air gap things? Why is the architecture such that malicious actors are able to dig into networks? Regrettably, they are, and not only that, all those networks are interconnected in one way or another. So the thing about making Erie County more secure, or making the city of Syracuse more secure, is because of the interconnected nature of how a lot of our government systems operate. That in effect makes New York City more secure, and it makes New York State more secure. And there are many connections between the city and the state. So the more secure those two large entities are, collectively, the more secure we all are from a cybersecurity perspective, which means that your personally identifiable information is better protected. It means you'll have more consistent access to resources. I mean, when you think about the services that local governments provide, that's voting, it's healthcare, it's education, it's a lot of civil services. We're very lucky in New York City to have a fairly robust and fairly mature cybersecurity infrastructure in place, but it's certainly not impenetrable. And this will help further secure that architecture and that system. And in doing so, it helps ensure that the services that we all rely on are consistently available.
And what's the time frame for all of this to be up and running?
So we anticipate hitting sort of initial operating capability in June. And that will be primarily New York City and New York State working together as we sort of prepare to operationalize it and bring in additional local governments. My hope is to have the other 5 cities that we're partnering with on board by the end of the year, and then we'll expand out to the rest of the state. In the interim, the state is also providing an endpoint protection service called CrowdStrike to all counties. New York City already has it on all of its endpoints, and one of the reasons we're going with CrowdStrike in particular is because the city is using it. That should be able to make it into the JSOC on a much quicker timeline. So think of that as like a 50 or 75% solution that will bring in that statewide telemetry to make us all a little bit more secure.
Stu, you have another question?
Yeah, you're only working with government, so you're also working to protect the power grid and the water supply and so on.
So we're only working with governments at this point, but the thing to understand is almost all of the water in New York, all of the public water systems in New York are government entities. So they're owned by government, they're operated by government, and a lot of the energy infrastructure is. Obviously, there is private energy infrastructure throughout the state, and we've started having conversations with some private energy providers to see if it would make sense to partner with them. And I mean, frankly, from their perspective, it may not. A lot of them are actually fairly mature in terms of their cybersecurity. We will obviously work with them. We already work with them to make sure that we're sharing intelligence, to make sure that they are aware of the threats that we're aware of. Whether or not they will derive benefit from participating in this, I think is yet to be determined, but we're certainly open to it.
All right, Steve, you have a question?
You mentioned that JSOC's one of the objectives to gather telemetry for New York State systems, New York cities across the state. The challenges with telemetry is the quality of the data and how long will you keep it. So starting with the harder question first, the quality of the data that who's going to be able to maintain, verify that the data that you get from the agencies, from the other different cities and the other groups within the state are what they are, and be able to follow up with them to frankly audit and make sure that they follow good data gathering.
So a lot of them aren't going to follow good data gathering, right? And we are working from the assumption that will be the case. So what we're doing is we're working on using our collective sort of economy of scale buying power to provide them with certain tools that will provide us with telemetry that we have confidence in, right? That's one of the reasons we're going with CrowdStrike. We're working closely with the State Board of Elections, which a couple of years ago put FireEye, IDS, and IPS into every county. Again, that's a high quality product, and we can then build parsers that will allow us to collect and normalize that telemetry. I don't think we're at the phase yet where we've made a determination on how long we're going to store that data for. My guess is no less than 90 days, but we'll see. I think most of the tooling that we're planning on using is going to be cloud-based, so we'll have capacity. It'll just be a matter of how much actual data we start to bring in, and the intent over time is to start providing either more quality tools to local governments, or alternatively, if we recognize that they're already using certain products, to build parsers that allow us to take advantage of that.
Okay, so just to clarify or verify that I heard it right, at least for the first question, there is no audit of the quality of the data. There's no governing body that follows up with it.
Of the quality of the data, right? We plan on maintaining high standards within the JSOC. I understood your question to be, are we going to go into local governments and ensure that they are that they're sort of optimizing the products that they buy or that we buy for them? And I would say we do have every intention of ensuring that they're optimizing the products that they buy that we buy for them. And to the extent that we're in a position to help them optimize the products they've bought for themselves, we will do that. My cyber incident response team at Homeland Security is currently working with them to do that. But it will not be an audit. The Office of the State Comptroller may do audits. We do not do audits.
All right. Thanks, Steve, for the question. I think we're just about out of time here, but I know you have to go. I guess the big question community-wide is, what are the threats? What threats does Russia pose in terms of cybersecurity? Is there anything we should be concerned about?
So I'll start by saying that at this point, as of this morning, when I last spoke to some of our federal partners, there is no sort of established credible threat directed at the United States right now, right? We know that the Russians have capability. We have not seen them try to leverage it in a meaningful and destructive way. I think part of the reason we're not seeing that right now is because they are not interested in escalating this conflict beyond where it already is, because we think that a lot of their sort of offensive cyber resources are already tied up. That may obviously shift over time, but for the time being, it's been relatively quiet. I don't know exactly how to answer your question, Matt. They have the potential to pose a threat. We spent the last several years working hard, particularly with critical infrastructure, to harden those targets. But I'm never going to sit here and tell you that like they're impenetrable. They are. They can be penetrated, and Russia is certainly one of the most sophisticated actors out there. So we focused on things like redundancy and incident response to make sure that we're prepared should an event occur. But I mean, so far, things have remained relatively quiet. And honestly, when the conflict in Ukraine started, I think we were all planning for the very worst, which probably helped get us into a pretty good place where we are now.
All right, good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I know that question started circulating for the past couple of months now. Nobody could really say for
Here
sure.
too, trust me. It was like as soon as it started, that was the conversation of the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, you have one last question?
Someone to want to ask the previous speaker, how I know it's several degrees away from the JSOC, but how can the community like ourselves help improve, refine who's essentially this telemetry gathering, being able to get better data, get what better data points to observe, how can we help contribute to better cybersecurity for our communities?
So I would say, I think that's a really good question, but I think I'm going to kind of answer a different question, or I'm going to answer it in a way that kind of goes in a different direction, which is to say, like, I think the best thing that you can do to make your community more secure from a cybersecurity perspective is to take steps to make sure that you are personally being responsible on the internet, right? And that's about educating yourself to mis and disinformation. It's about educating yourself to avoid becoming a victim of identity theft. It's about, protecting yourself on the internet, ensuring that you're doing things like using multi-factor authentication when it's available, using a VPN when it's available, or just getting a VPN and using it. Doing things you can to protect your identity. Because, when I think of cybersecurity incidents, my mind immediately goes to, like something that spreads like the common cold. If you become a victim, somebody will leverage their access to your systems to turn everybody on your contact list into a victim. And so the best way you can protect your community is by doing everything you can to protect yourself. Does that kind of answer your question, Stephen?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of education that we need on the community side, since computer technology education doesn't come in second nature as riding a bicycle. So I guess we have a lot of education ourselves, how to protect ourselves.
That's
online.
a good thing for me to take back.
Anything that helps it easy, one page graphic takeaway that sums up everything you mentioned would be great.
So if you go to our website, New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, if you just put it like Google dishes, DHSES, go to the Office of Counterterrorism I think it's the Cyber Incident Response tab or Cybersecurity tab. We have a bunch of flyers up there, like one pagers that'll just give you some tips.
Could you provide a link or share it afterwards?
Give me 1 sec. I will Google it right now and put it in there. if you just scroll down to the bottom of the page that I'm going to provide you, should have those one pagers I mentioned.
Did you give it messages to all?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me change that. There you go. Great, and I apologize. This has been a pleasure, but unfortunately, I have to break away. I have another commitment. But thank you very much for taking the time with me today.
I appreciate the time, Ben, and we'll touch base again sometime in the future.
Great. All right. Have
All
a
right.
lovely evening. Thanks a
You
lot.
too. Take care. All right. So that is agenda item number 2. Does anyone have any questions or anything you wanted to say about cybersecurity within the committee? All right. So again, I did want to get everything. I want to get this on there. It's very difficult. We had a very difficult time tracking down the speaker. Brendan can attest to. But I'm glad we got some high level information and at least have a point of contact now going forward. So that is pretty much all I have. In terms of a chair's report, I think somebody who caught the pre-meeting chatter, TBD as to what next month will bring for whether we try to go back in person, whether we do we stay on Zoom. We're at that point again where there's uncertainty. So we'll see what happens, but I would fully expect to be back in person for the fall. So that is it. Does anyone have any items of old or new business? I should also mention that next month, so next month's agenda is pretty well set. So we'll be focusing on the budget requests, inclusive but not limited to the homeless shelter security. Scheduling some speakers to talk about that where we can. And then we'll talk about any other budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year. And then we will talk about the qualified immunity proposed legislation that we were going to talk about tonight until we got that cybersecurity presentation. So that shifted things around a little bit. So that's what we're planning for June. I know Stu is working on a draft resolution there. So be interested to hear that conversation. And as you can tell, we're a small committee right now. The appointments were just made this week, I believe. So we should be getting hopefully another couple of committee members, if not for June, but certainly by the fall. So we'll see what happens there. So we did have a couple of resignations. So I appreciate everybody staying on and making an effort to join tonight, because we doesn't take much to lose quorum. We have like 6 people or so. So any items of old or new business?
I see that the hand of Eric Straza from the DA's office is raised.
Oh, okay. Eric, I didn't even know Eric was on, but okay.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Can you hear me?
Sure.
Just really quickly, I'll be mindful of the time, but just wanted to announce something that we're really trying to push from our office. Wanted to let you guys know that we will be holding a gun buyback in Central Harlem on June 25th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I have flyers if you guys want to help get the word out, but we think it's a really important public safety issue, something we can do to combat gun violence in our community. Basically just an opportunity for community members to surrender their firearms in exchange for prepaid gift cards, the amount dependent on what kind of firearm is surrendered. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up and put that on your radar. If you guys have any questions or want me to elaborate on anything, you can feel free to reach out offline as well.
Thanks, Eric. I know there were some board members that were looking to get a gun buyback in this district, which unfortunately was turned down. But it's good to hear that there's one in Harlem. Stu?
You buying back unregistered or illegal guns as well?
So it's specifically a buyback for, we're doing like a no questions asked buyback, just to encourage as many community members as possible to surrender their firearms. And so we won't actually be looking into the guns at all. We're trying to create the most comfortable environment possible. Again, for community members to come and feel comfortable handing them over. So they'll basically be sealed up and destroyed, and nothing else will be done with them. So if they were illegal or anything like that, effectively the buyback will not discriminate, and people would be encouraged to surrender them.
All right. Steve?
It's kind of curious, what disqualifies a district from a gun buyback program? Is it just simple budgeting challenges?
That I actually don't know off the top of my head. I can bring that back to the office and follow up. Matt, I don't know if you had any separate conversations with the district attorney's office where you got some more context or any more information on that. But in the event that you did not, I can certainly ask the office and follow up with you guys.
Yeah, I as far as I know on the NYPD side, it's run by their Community Affairs Bureau, which bases it solely on crime statistics, which we didn't have enough gun violence to qualify.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the guns just sit silent. They don't have to be, an event doesn't have to happen for guns to exist in a district. So that's why I was
Right.
kind of wondering if there were other metrics that were involved.
Yeah, I mean it's all discretionary basically within the police department, but that's about all I can say on it. They look at where the crime is happening. We certainly push back on that. I felt that centrally located event might draw people, just as it does crime, but that request was turned down. So I think Brendan and then Lou.
Yeah, Eric, if you could please send information on this gun buyback event to the CD6 office, so that way we can have it up on our community events page and spread the word, that would be great.
I will absolutely do that, Brendan. Thank you for that. And Matt, just to confirm with you guys too, this is also in partnership with the NYPD's Office of Community Affairs. So it would be something similar that you may have spoken to them about in the past.
Sounds good. All right, Lou.
Brendan actually got about 90% of my question. Is there any possibility that we could get the criteria for the buybacks from the district attorney, from the police department, and circulate them to the committee so that we can exert some leverage or some pressure if there's a necessity for a buyback in the district? And the information would then be the underpinning by which we could raise the issue.
Thanks, Lou. I think that, off the top of my head, like Matt had said, I think the kind of the coordination originates from the Department of Community Affairs. But that being said, I'm happy to, again, see what we can provide you with if there are certain metrics that are looked at, and then follow up as well. If you guys want to follow up with me offline too, if there are more specific questions about what can be done in the CB6 area, you can feel free to do that. I can throw my email in the chat if you guys don't have it already.
It actually raises the question of public safety in Board 6 in terms of police activity and so on. Perhaps we could start to get data from the 13th precinct for the patrol districts in Board 6 and the 17th precinct, which is wholly within Board 6, so we get some sense of what's happening out on the street.
Yeah, Lou, I hear you, and I've been working with the 13th precinct on getting a lot of that information. 17th, I'm pretty close to it, but there simply hasn't been a whole lot to talk about in recent weeks. But within the 13th, communication has been dismal, to say the least. So I'm working on a better solution there, but hope to have some speakers at our June meeting that can talk about those topics.
I understand that the 13th is a bit of an anomaly because it runs east and west, and only certain patrol sectors in the 13th are within Board 6. So maybe we could work out something with them to isolate that data and circulate it.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the best way to define the metrics. But you know, as from every time I do ask them, I mean, I do watch their precinct-wide numbers every week, and if there's something that pops up, you know, I do follow up on it. And 9 out of 10 times, it's outside of our district in CB5 that those issues are occurring. So more to come there. So hopefully we'll have some precinct representation in our June meeting. I know it's been a little while. Any other items of old or new business before we go?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Lou has made the motion to adjourn.